Good evening, members. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies already given from Councillor Wotton, Councillor Ward, Councillor Milne, Councillor Lambourne. Have I any other apologies, please, members?
I think Chair Councillor Cross as well, I believe.
And Councillor Cross. Thank you very much. Substitute members tonight, I believe we have Councillor Mrs. Lorraine Shaw for Councillor Wotton, Councillor FD for Councillor Ward, and Councillor Linden for Councillor Cross. Thank you. Thank you, members. Non-members attending, we have Councillor Mrs. Wilson. Welcome, Councillor Mrs. Wilson. Minutes of the meeting, agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of March 2024. Are members happy that that's a true record? Thank you, members. Agenda item number 5, to receive any declarations of interest, including whipping declarations. No one is indicating. Thank you, members. Agenda item 6. It is the approval of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's annual report. The committee is required to report annually to full council. The draft report is here for committee's consideration. Who's introducing the report? And our officer will introduce this report for us, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, the report author can't be here tonight. She's unwell. So there's a limited amount I can say about this report, except that we hope that it gives a true and complete comprehensive reflection on the business of this committee over the past year. I think the key point for this committee to be aware of is that with the move into the committee system from May, there is to be some reconfiguration of Rochford Council's committees, one of which is the establishment of a Scrutiny and Performance Committee. So it will have a slightly different focus as a committee in the coming municipal year, but it will still undertake the scrutiny function of the council. I'm happy to take any questions that members have on the report, but it may be that I'm taking many of the questions away and coming back to members.
Thank you. I think if members are happy, should we go through the report page by page? If anybody wants to raise anything, please indicate. Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just ask the officers, bearing in mind we're changing from one system to another, to ensure that anything that should be picked up by relevant committees is carried forward to the relevant committee. I doubt there'll be much, to be honest, from this committee, but I do think it's something we need to be careful of, that we don't lose sight of things that are pending. And personally, I don't see any need to go through the report page by page. I've got no questions, I've read it, but that's a personal opinion. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Mason. That has been noted. I think there are some things in here that will possibly move forward with the new committee system. I'm happy to take this report in its entirety. Any other members got any questions or comments on it? It's actually just for noting, I believe, this report. Yeah. So members, is that noted? Thank you, members. Agenda item 7 has been removed from this meeting. However, if any members have any questions or anything that they would like to fill into this report, I understand you have Councillor Mrs. Shaw. Could you please relay that to the officer or through myself, and we will make sure that that's included. So, members, we're going to move on to agenda item 8. And we're going to receive the report of the Director of Assets and Investments updating our committee on the introduction of implementing the free 3-hour parking for blue badge holders. Thank you. That's yourself, isn't it, Phoebe? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, in front of you tonight is the report updating members of the implementation of free 3-hour parking for blue badge holders. This was implemented in October last year. This is a follow-up that was on the forward plan for this committee. So at the last committee, members noted that a full report should come to full council after calling in a decision made from the portfolio holder at the time. The decision of the portfolio was not overturned, therefore the decision was implemented. Report on other options will come to full council, but after a 12-month implementation period. So we would expect that report to come around November, December time. Regarding any financial implications, previously under the scheme where blue badge holders were able to were charged for parking, and under the new scheme we can't determine the difference between, our systems don't allow us to state whether a person is paying and parking in a disabled bay or using a blue badge or not. So we can't determine the financial implication between the old scheme and the new scheme. All that we can say is there's no material impact because we monitor the budgets for car parking income in totals, and at this moment in time since implementation there's been no material change in our car parking income. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Members, have you got any questions for Phoebe? Councillor Spearing.
Thank you, Phoebe. I was quite fascinated to read this report because when I proposed it this time last year, there were numerous questions just by everybody about consultation, splits of whether people were residents in the district, one thing or another. I was asked to bring all this information back within 3 months. Miraculously, when the Conservatives lost the administration, suddenly we've now got an 18-month lay-up time. It was such a bad idea that it now became the administration's policy. And to be honest, the last meeting this time last year was a complete farce on this
Councillor
aspect.
Spearing, can I draw you to a question, please?
Yeah, the
for
question is,
officer? Thank you.
and here it is, really, that meeting this time last year was a complete farce, as far as I'm concerned, on this aspect, and all the issues that were raised
Thank you,
at that
Councillor
time
Spearing.
have not
You
been
need to
asked,
mute him.
and why?
Thank you.
Why have they not been asked, and why have they not been submitted?
Members, have we any other questions, please, for the officers rather than statements? Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yes, I think regardless of the history, and we have to look at the positives from this, and we have a positive situation where we are helping people that have a difficulty that is very hard for us to assess. And I'm very pleased to hear that from the officer that there's been no material impact on the car parking. It would be very good to have further information when the review takes place, but I appreciate the difficulty in obtaining that information, and I'm sure the officer will provide us with what information is available. Thank you.
Members, are there any other questions? Councillor Mrs Gadsden.
Just Phoebe, I just don't understand why. I understand that, you know, there's information you need to gather, but I don't understand why you need such a delay in time before you start gathering that information, because it doesn't look like you're going to start gathering that until it's been going for a year, is it? So we expect it in 18 months from when it was first approved.
So when it was first approved, we didn't implement the decision until October. So that's when the parking became free for 3 hours with displaying a blue badge. So therefore, there is limited amount of information we can gather. So a 12-month period would mean that what information we can gather comes back as meaningful. So the amount of PCNs that we issue in a 12-month period, how much we kind of are challenged or overturned, as well as if we can quantify anything financial, which is difficult because we don't differentiate between who's paying to park in a blue badge or not. So the 12-month period just gives us a period of it being in action for that full 12 months to kind of compare year on year.
So, sorry, just come back at that. So is there any information that would change the status of what we're doing. So is there information where you would feel that you can't reduce, you'd have to reduce the 3 hours? Or as the opposition at the time wanted it to be, I believe, free all day parking, or no, it was something like that, wasn't it? It was extended to that period.
Not from myself or.
Members, please let the
So-
officer answer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so what I'm trying to understand is there's very limited information you can gather. So any assessment you will be done, you make will be on limited information. So therefore, what is the likelihood of anything changing from what we have now?
So that would be determined by the members at the time. Options we put forward, I've kind of keep what we've got. You potentially could look at extending the 3 hours to kind of all day, but there will be implications, risk around that, ability for people to then not park in full. So kind of all them options will be put forward with the data that we've gathered. So as well, we'd look at if there was any kind of complaints of people not being able to get parking, etc., and that as well. So there'd be options after a 12-month review, and then members would make the decision of what option they would then.
Have you
go
had
with.
any feedback from October till now with residents not being able to park or?
No, so we've had no
No
feedback
feedback
from
at
that. All that we've got is the PCNs that we've issued where people haven't been displaying their blue badges and their clock.
So basically, what's been implemented was the motion that.
At this moment in time, the
is
current
the-
implementation was what was
what
the previous portfolio holder. Yes.
put forward. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Phoebe. Councillor Effie.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple quick questions. How many times a day do the parking wardens actually visit the car parks? And what's the hours between the times they visit?
They don't have kind of a set schedule, and I can't kind of off the top of my head answer that. I can come back to you and give you kind of.
The reason why I'm asking the question is because if they only visit once and it's a free hour, they've got free hours, how are they going to collect any information to see if they've gone or used it? So, and if they're having to go back every 3 hours to see if they're going to give someone a ticket, what will the cost implication be on the council where they're not going around other car parks actually giving tickets? Or they probably will go around all the other car parks, so they'll just be doing more work if they just visit once.
So the implementation of this scheme has not impacted the rota or the civil enforcement officers' time, and that they still go and visit all the car parks multiple times throughout the day. And obviously there are car parks that we know are a lot busier and a lot more congested and times that, so we make sure we kind of align our staff's time to go and visit that to kind of encourage the right behaviours for parking.
Right, so just to clarify that, so they do visit more than once a day and they will be less than in a 3 hour period, so they would catch people or just over a 3 hour period. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I know we're near the end of this municipal year, but if it can still go through the chair rather than just a conversation with the officer, that would be grateful. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Phoebe, how many officers have we got? Operatives do we have? Enforcement operatives.
2.5 FTEs.
Right, okay. So they've got to go around all the car parks, and we know some are busier. So through the chair, how are you actually going to gather this information that you're going to bring back in October when you've only got 2.5 operatives to go around RDC car parks, please?
Thank you. If Phoebe can answer this, then we've just got one more question, I think, on this.
Based on the information that provided, obviously based on the PCNs that they are issuing, obviously again, we'd monitor any complaints coming in that anyone would make into the parking officers as well. Our number of FTEs have not changed, and the scheme has not made any material impact to their work previously. So it's just data, as I said, through the PCNs, just through their visits and visible. And as I said, if there were any areas of concerns, that would get highlighted to us and we would concentrate on that to gather further information. So it's kind of, we adapt to kind of the information coming back to us.
Thank you. Does that answer your question fully? Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Belton.
Thank you. This is a really minor point, and English language is not my forte, but point 1.1, giving the background information, it says a portfolio holder for environment. Should it not be the portfolio holder because there was only one at the time? And like I say, it's such a minor point, but if the report's accurate, I think it should say the, not a.
Is everybody happy for that amendment? I don't see anybody disagreeing. That's fine. A small amendment there, please. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yeah, through the chair, I would just like to point out that I do take exception to the political comments about the previous opposition when they know that the previous opposition was not a generic body. It was made up of lots of different bodies. And I do think they should say some opposition members. Let's have a clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, members. That was just an update for information. So, members, we're going to move on to agenda item 9. This is one team, a transformation programme, strategic partnership with Brentwood Borough Council, Q4 update, to consider the report of the Director of Policy and Delivery, providing the Q4 update, November 23 to January 24, along with the annual update on the progress of the One Team Transformation Programme from February 23 to January 24. Greg Campbell, our Director for Policy and Delivery, will present the report. Thank you, Greg. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is, as said, the Q4 update of the One Team progress and the annual review from last year. Just a few updates and sadly one omission that I have to admit and point out in a minute, and I'll come on to, and apologies for that in advance. The report sets out where we are at the moment with the One Team. It also, I was asked a question prior to the meeting about paragraph or 1.18 savings to date, paragraph 1.19, why is there such a big difference between the Rochford savings and the savings that are made at Brentwood? The reason being is following a discussion with the Director of Resources, Director Tim Willis, was that the base starting point is considerably different on some of the service reviews that we started from. So where it may be the same kind of saving, i.e. percentage-wise, because the base starting budget was different and sometimes significant, that meant the actual overall saving was different. I've clarified that. Then on to sadly my omission, and this is about the change in approach. So paragraph 1.21, if you notice, it ends with the word about the further, which obviously does not make much sense. Apologies, this was pointed out to me, and it should have said, without the joined up services that are beneficial to both organisations. So it should have just finished that off without making that point. Then back to that paragraph, which is about the change in approach, which addresses also the question at a previous scrutiny committee about ending service reviews in April because they weren't reaching what they were meant to be doing and they were creating anxiety amongst staff. Towards the end of last year, we did notice that 1 or 2 service reviews weren't achieving the benefits that we'd identified. They weren't quite hitting what we wanted them to do. So we started reviewing what needed to be done. And this is a culmination of that, which is actually a change in approach. We're going into a kind of phase 2 of the transformation work. And we're actually introducing transformation plans, which is actually working with the services. And we're turning it on its head, looking at exactly what needs to be done first to bring the services slowly together, to work on what needs to be done. So that would be joining up the IT, the policies first, looking at the processes where we can streamline those, creating a piece of work which we can work with the services to deliver over a period of time that we will set and work with them. At the same time, we will work with them to identify what those savings will be. And as in the report, that will then feed into the medium-term financial position. I hope that addresses that point as well. Thank you, Chair. Sorry that was a bit long, and apologies for my mistakes. Any questions?
Thank you, Greg. Was the date to be amended on phase 3 as well?
Sorry, I got excited and kept putting 2024. You will notice in one of the charts that basically it's a whole year on the same year, 2024 March to 2024 April. It was a long review. Apologies. Thank you for pointing that out, Chair.
Councillor Mrs Belton.
Yeah, just an observation. Obviously, within the phases, there's multiple slippages as a result of staff absence and staff movement. So the question is there a plan to remedy that at any point? Because we still continue to have staff absences and staff leaving and recruitment and so on. So will any of those slippages be caught up, or is the timeline now revised as a result of those slippages? So just to understand what comes next.
Thank you. Greg, if you could answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there will always be staff changes throughout any organisation, which creates sometimes a ripple effect. The straight answer is yes, it will have an effect on the timeline. There's nothing we can do. We're already where we are. We're hoping that these transformation plans will enable us to create a clear timeline that we can see about when we can phase these in the future.
Thank you, Greg. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'd like to ask, I've got 3 questions that I'd like to ask, and I appreciate these may not be able to be answered in full tonight, but I do think that they're pertinent. Firstly, what efforts have been made and what actions have been taken to measure the quality and the efficiency of the service that we provide to our residents before and after the amalgamation of services? I've not seen any statistics or anything, be it subjective or objective, and I realise that it's not in this report, but I do think we need some indication of whether or not this is working and a measurement of this. So I would appreciate that, and I'll appreciate it coming back. So that's the first question, Madam Chairman.
Would you like to take them one at a time? Just while it's fresh with you, if that's okay.
If that's okay. So when service reviews are undertaken, the service review identifies what the performance measures will be, the benefits realisation after the service has been implemented. Obviously, that doesn't happen immediately. There should not be any impact on the delivery of the service. So we make sure that whatever's going to be put in place, that should not impact on the quality of the service to the resident or whoever else is actually taking that service on. So we certainly put in a benefits realisation to, 1, make sure we're hitting the benefits, 2, performance measures, and also just so, I mean, members be aware of this, but they do service plans and they create measures for the year anyway to make sure that the quality of the service does not reduce.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I think it would be helpful to have some very brief summary of that, perhaps in future reports, if that is feasible. If I can go on to my second question, and these two are linked. What are the predicted annual savings when RDC first arranged for this proposal to amalgamate the one team? And have these been achieved? And if not, can you explain the differentials between the predicted savings at the outset to the savings that we have now?
Thank you. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what that number is, but I will be, as I would be, can't say I would be honest, I'm never dishonest, sorry, that actually the savings I know have not hit quite that mark, because against the service reviews, they haven't quite hit that mark. So they would not have reached the overall target on those.
Again, I think it would have been helpful to have that figure as a benchmark. If that was our anticipated saving by going through this process, then we would like to see if that saving has been achieved, and if not, how far short of it or how far ahead of it, hopefully the savings will be greater. So again, perhaps that detail could be incorporated in future reports, if that's acceptable to everyone.
Thank you. I think I can see everybody's acceptable with that. There you go. We can have that minuted, please. Thank you. Now it's Councillor Mrs Mason. Have you finished? Your mic's still on.
Pardon?
Have you finished? Because your mic's still on. Sorry.
I can switch it off for you.
Thank you. Councillor Mr FD.
Thank you, Chairman. Right through the chair, I've got a couple of questions for you, Greg. One is in there, you just mentioned about how do we measure where our we supply our services, and at the end of the day, we supply services to our residents. So how do we measure how our residents are feeling about what is happening with the one team, and if there's been a drop in services? I do remember we used to get a report on complaints that went through to each part of the council. Does that still happen? Is that still come to us? It might be a useful part.
Thank you. Greg, are you able to answer that one?
Yes, and I'm glad to say that I'm going to be bringing a report to committee in the new year, which highlights about bringing, if members want to approve it, a quarterly report on performance measures, complaints and FOIs to a committee in the future. So that'd be a quarterly report, and that's what we're recommending. So that will come to, I can't remember exactly the name of the committee in June, but it's coming to one. I was even writing part of that report tonight to bring it before members in the new municipal year. So that will hopefully address that and bring something quarterly to members to consider.
Thank you. Have you another question?
Yeah,
Councillor?
through the chair again. It does, I was looking at the red lines and the green lines and the yellow lines, and R29, which is the give us benefits, WAMs if one partner withdraws. Now, this will be a political decision if the partner withdraws. So what are you doing to to get information from members, because members are on the ground talking to the residents, and we a lot of the time get it in the ear about things that are not happening. So is there going to be any sort of engagement with members to feedback into this report? Because it seems to be very officer-based at the moment, not really member-based at all. And at the end of the day, the members, if they get enough headache from this, they will say, well, we've had enough. So I think that might be a way to get rid of some of the red.
Thank you. Greg, I don't know if you can shine any light on that one.
So always welcome to ideas how we can feedback better to members. At the moment, we provide this report quarterly. We also have the programme board, which the leader and the deputy leader from both authorities are involved in and can feedback to members as well. And if there are ever any questions, I am always welcome and open for members to ask questions about that. They're the methods we've got at the moment. If there is any others, I'm happy to consider them with members.
Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair. I think I misexplained or you misunderstood. I'm talking about how do members feedback into this report so you can get not just officers, so members can actually feed back into it, because there's no engagement with members actually feeding into these reports that I can see on here.
I might be able to answer that. As our officers pointed out, this is coming to committee in June. So it would be an opportunity, I presume, for that to be formed then.
There is in June a report which will recommend having performance FOIs and complaints coming on a quarterly basis to members, which they can feed into as well. And in that report, it does suggest setting up a working group that meets ahead of that meeting in order to scrutinise the information with officers, so it can then come to committee being scrutinised by members.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just got one more. Okay, sorry. Right, with how many people across both councils do you think will be our end amount of officers and people working?
Oh, I don't even know if Greg can answer that at the moment.
Well,
but
just rough.
Have a go, Greg.
Working about now
Well,
for both organisations?
Both organisations, when all the service reviews are finally finished and you have some idea about who you need to actually fulfil the roles.
Chair, is that okay to?
Yes,
sorry. I can't answer, obviously, because the service reviews haven't been done yet. So it's difficult for me to actually say exactly how many staff will be needed in the future as well.
Okay, through the chair, a little bit of follow on that is, so will there be an even percentage split across Brentwood and Rochford, or is it looking for one council employee more than the other at the moment?
Well, Greg will try to answer this, and I think that's going to be the final.
Okay, that is
question,
the last
so,
one, actually.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're looking for it to be a one team, so the officers work across both organisations. So won't necessarily be working for a organisation, but across both. There may be pockets which may work for Rochford independently. So, for example, and I'm talking not out of turn, but refuse guys, they would be employed by Rochford. So I can't say exactly the number, and there may be other pockets of those. It's difficult to say at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Greg.
I'm not trying to.
Yeah, that's fine. I've done as thank you, Chairman.
Welcome. Councillor Mrs. Gadsden, sorry.
Through the chair. I think one of the things we're not taking into account, as well as the financial advantages. I mean, there's quite a long list of other advantages, and I think we've got to remember that in an area where it's getting even more difficult to get staff, sharing staff is an advantage. So, and what different skills they bring is an advantage. So I know we're going through a very difficult time at the moment. I'm wondering though, if part of the pressures of going to a committee system and dealing with a partnership has been sort of a little bit of overwhelming for staff in sense of the amount of workloads they must be going through.
I'm not so sure how relevant this is to the report. Would you like to answer that, Greg?
Well, just as there's a lot of slippage, there's a lot of recruitment.
Let's let the officer
I
answer.
can try to. I mean, when you're going through change, there's always different types of pressures. We do talk to staff, we communicate, put everything through, so we try and take everyone on the journey with them. Change into committee, actually, hopefully, because the two authorities then aligned with the committee, we've already aligned the committee templates and the way that officers work, so hopefully that may actually reduce some of the burden, I hope. Yeah.
Thank you. That's interesting.
Thank you, Greg, for answering all those. Councillor Booth.
Understanding we are in purdah and not wishing to make any political points at this moment in time, but of course the current system is executive, where there is slippage, rather than moving to the committee system. So that's the first point I'd like to make in that. And secondly, just for clarity, when someone's taken on, are they contracted in one team, or are they contracted to Rochford, or they're contracted to Brentwood? Are we doing half and half? How are the actual contracts working out?
Thank you, Greg. If you can answer Councillor Booth's question.
So we do try and create an even split on that, so to make sure that when there's new employees that come on board, there is, if they are contracted sometimes to Rochford and sometimes to Brentwood, so where they're actually paid from creates an even split or more even split, certainly not loading one authority against the other.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Mrs. Belton.
Just on the back of that point, if I may, and I fully understand that concept and why that would be done, but if the partnership failed and was separated, how is the risk calculated there? Because we could have the Director of Finance employed on Brentwood because that was the time they came in to balance it, and environment on Rochford and so on and so forth. That seems like a concerning risk that one could be weighted with all of the essentials. I know what I'm trying to say, not very eloquently, but that seems like a weighted risk to me.
Greg, if you can answer.
Yeah, no, I do understand, because actually, like you point out, actually one side could be left with a certain type of officer and actually the other side is left without it. It's a difficult one because we've set the Section 113 agreement up to make sure that it seemed to be fair, but there will be, obviously, when we employ that to those where they're paid from, eventually they may work as one team and work across both, but they're paid from, and to try and reduce the risk for both organisations, but there will be always that inherent risk.
Does that answer your question? Lovely, thank you. Councillor Booth, you've got one more question.
So perhaps just to allay some of the concerns, perhaps it'd be good to have an analysis at some point in the new municipal year of who's placed where, because I think I'm understanding that someone will have a contract either with Rochford or either with Brentwood. Someone wouldn't have a contract where they have 60% of their time with Rochford and 40% of their time with Brentwood. That's my understanding. Is that correct from what you've said? Sorry.
Yes, I think it's, as you say, there's the principle where they're paid from. So paid from Brentwood or paid from Rochford, and that denotes where they would be. So if there ever was, and hopefully not, a split, that's, where they would lie in terms of their sovereignty.
So perhaps I could suggest we have some analysis of that to the appropriate committee in the new municipal year, just to reassure the members of Rochford Council. I don't know if that needs to be a formal request or Chair, I'll leave that to you.
I think that's a reasonable suggestion. Everybody else is nodding and our officers noted it. So it's minuted. Thank you. I see no other members indicating. So members, that report is just for noting. Is that noted, members? Thank you. Item 10 is the key decisions document. So I'm just going to go through that. It is short, so I'm going to go through it page by page. If there is any questions, please indicate. So page 11.2, no, I'm on the wrong page myself. I do apologise. Key decision document. Key decision document. Oh, it is. Thank you. There's no page number on it. Never mind. Okay. The first page on the report, I'm sorry, it doesn't have a page number on it. It's voluntary sector grants allocations. Any members got any questions on that? And then there's also the purchase of the street and waste cleansing fleet. Any questions, members? Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Date when or period within which a decision is to be made.
Sorry, could you go towards the mic a little bit? I didn't
You
pick
look
any
at
of that.
the purchase of street and waste cleansing fleet.
Yes.
It states under the date when or period within which decision is to be made. Clumsy English, isn't it? March 24. I'm sure that we're in April. And I understand that these reports should be updated. So we need an update on that item.
Thank you, Mrs Mason. The officer will update us on that and circulate any relevant information to have that correct. We do apologise. Obviously, one officer has unfortunately fallen poorly, so a little bit behind there. Our officer will just comment on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reference actually a point that Councillor Mrs Mason made earlier in the meeting, which is just around decisions that are either coming forward or that need to be implemented that the council has already taken, and ensuring that's all carried over to committees in the new municipal year. So I just want to reassure members that that piece of work is happening, that post-May there will be work plans for committees that will show various new decisions based on political control of the council, but it will also include things that have carried from this municipal year to the next one. So although this decision document isn't up to date, and Councillor Mrs Mason's quite right about that decision has already been to the executive, there's an element of key decisions document closing down and things that would otherwise be in that transferring into a new process that's going to emerge in the new municipal year. So I just want to give members reassurance that that isn't forgotten, I suppose. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor FD, you wanted to say something on that?
Thank you. Where you're talking about decisions made will be transferred over to the new committee system, will there be a handover, whoever's going to be the chairman on that? Is that going to be something that's going to be done?
Yes, Matthew will answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, so we will ensure that all new chairmen and indeed continuing chairmen in similar roles will have training in that role. We'll also be providing committee-specific training to members. We'll be providing wider skills and I suppose non-skills based training to members, and also briefing particularly new members on things that are issues that have come up in the last few years that are going to affect them in the new municipal year, which of course returning members or members who haven't had to stand for election would have the background to already, having served as councillors. So it's a long way of saying yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Matthew. It will be new for quite a few of us, but then we will want new, won't we? Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you. I thank the officer for his explanation on the future committee system. And just for clarity, the key decisions document, I don't think people are totally aware, but it has items that are over 50,000 or affect more than one ward. So, but it won't exist after so And in some ways, I think that's going to be a positive, because I don't think it's been a tremendously well-used or utilised document. I'll go no further, but certainly things ought to be carried forward to the committees. The other thing that Councillor FD mentioned, and I think he's got a fair point, he mentioned the word handover. As we are aware, there was a change of administration this last May. There was no handover from previous chairs, previous lead members, and I would ask that is.
I think we do have to watch where we're straying to, please, Councillor Mrs Mason.
That's out of order, because it was mentioned handover. I'm just saying, I'm asking that it be done. No, I do think you'll take your finger off of there and allow me to speak.
Yeah, as long as, excuse me, as long as that we do not stray into politics. Thank you. Thank you. Just process is fine.
Thank you. Yeah, as I was saying, last time there was no formal or informal handover of operations, and that made it very difficult. So I would say that a process should be put in place, regardless of politics, between the outgoing members, where possible, to the incoming chairman, because we need this council to operate efficiently without any political edges. This is a process that needs to be put in place, and I'm sure if I make that appeal that other members will help with that. Thank you.
I'm sure that all members will be willing to support newer members in any handovers, including chairs, if that could be minuted, that we can advise that. Councillor Mrs Mason, please. Mrs Gadsden, sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought Mrs Gadsden had indicated. Councillor Mrs Belton, I do apologise.
I fully support what Councillor Mrs Mason has said. The challenge will always be, and something that we may need to consider in process, is some outgoing chairman may not be on the council when the new council forms. So there can't be a handover, because I asked this very question historically. What happens if a lead member, a portfolio holder, a chairman, whatever it may be, doesn't get elected? How do they tell anybody that handover? So it's something to consider, because actually for continuity and for the benefit of our residents, that is a worthwhile piece of work, regardless of politics. So how that happens, I don't know, because you don't ever know what that new council looks like. But it's certainly something that we should maybe consider through the relevant committees in the future.
Yes, most definitely, and it's noted. Thank you. I think we're all concur on that. Any other members want to speak on this item? Right, that's the key decisions document. Now we just have the agenda item 11, which is the work plan. So you've got the work plan there in front of us. I think this is our opportunity, isn't it, Matthew, to mention anything that needs to be brought forward to committees in the new municipal year. There will, of course, be the statutory items such as the Community Safety Partnership, RIPA, and our financial reports that will be taken to committee. But if there is anything that you feel on that report that should be reviewed again or come back to a committee again next year. Councillor Mrs Belton.
Just a question, this probably my sort of naivety to this, but obviously, for example, because I'm sitting next to Councillor Gadsden, credit unions was on here for the relevant timeframes. And I think, Matthew, you may have alluded to this earlier, but will these automatically be put onto a committee agenda so that nothing gets, that won't happen?
Through you, Chair, if that's all right. We were actually having this conversation just the other day, that there's a large amount of this that will transfer to the new committee system. And if I'm just thinking about this particular committee's workload to begin with. So as the Chair has already mentioned, statutory items that come because of council resolutions to meetings on a regular basis, that will continue until such time as a decision is taken otherwise. There is, however, a new scrutiny committee that will exist from May, and that's notwithstanding the fact that a committee system has baked into it scrutiny as an inherent part of the system. So policy committees, as well as taking decisions on things in lieu of executive members, will also scrutinise and challenge those decisions as part of the decisions being taken. So this work plan will essentially become a really strong starting point for the new Scrutiny and Performance Committee. I can't guarantee that every single thing that the committee today might wish to be on there would necessarily be on the committee, because that all depends, starting from the outcome of the election, composition of committee, chair, other council business and so on. But it would give us a really strong foundation to bring business forward to that Scrutiny and Performance Committee. And just the final thing I say, Chair, is that I think what members will see from May onwards is that the first meeting or two meetings of each committee will probably feel quite similar to what you've been used to previously. And it's as members get used to a new system, a new way of decisions being taken, that actually some of the committees might start to have a slightly different focus or a slightly different way of looking at issues. And that's not wrong or right. It's just that members at that point might prefer a slightly different approach to things.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Missigard, do you want to come back?
Yes, please, just purely for just to ensure I understand this. So do we need to make a recommendation for an item to go forward if it's not statutory, or can we just take it that at the first meeting of that new committee, for example, the workbook would be looked at and that new committee would decide what items they want to move forward with? That seems like the most obvious approach to me, but I don't want to misunderstand what we're agreeing to.
So if there's an item on there that you do not want to fall from being taken forward to a committee, then yes, gladly put it forward. I can help because there's one item that I'm already going to ask to be taken to committee.
I mean, ultimately, there's not necessarily one item. There's lots of items. I'm almost of the opinion that the whole workbook goes forward, and then the new committee takes off of it what they don't think needs to be discussed, because I think to just pinpoint items, we could leave something behind if by mistake. To have a list ultimately.
Yes, no, I'm more than happy with that decision. Members, can I have a show of hands that we put forward the whole of the work plan? Thank you. Do you want to take a number? That's carried anyway. That's carried. Thank you, members. My concern on there was the highway rangers, because I strongly want that to be re-reviewed. We know that we put that forward. Let's see where we go. Councillor Mrs. Page.
Yes, through the chair, I hear what you're saying, Matthew, and that makes an awful lot of sense. Just I was fairly keen because Councillor Milne did bring forward Finchfield and Dutch Cottage to get on this plan somehow or other, and it's still not on there, is it?
You are quite right, Mrs. Page. So yes, if we can have that, please added, Finchfield and the Dutch Cottage to be reviewed. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Yeah, just a point, you're wanting to bring things forward for your own reasons or personal reasons, people do. But what we must remember is we have a 6-month rule from when a decision is made. So you can't bring things forward once a full council decision has been made until 6 months has passed, regardless of which system we're operating. Thank you.
Yes, that we understand the 6-monthly rule, Councillor Mrs. Mason. It wasn't myself who wanted to bring it forward. It was the members who voted. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but you commented on a particular item which has been decided very recently. Thank you.
Any other members indicating? No. Thank you, members. That then concludes the agenda. All I would like to say is huge thank you to you all. You've all helped this process this year. Some of you have been on work parties and work groups. It's very much appreciated. We've had a full agenda at most meetings, and huge thanks also to my Vice Chairman, Councillor Booth, and to the officers who have always provided some excellent reports for us. Thank you, members, and good evening.
Thank you
Could
to
we
you,
have a
Chairman.
chance to thank you both for your leadership at the meetings? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Yes, I would like to, as you're probably all aware by now, this is going to be my last meeting. I won't cheer too much, but I would like to say a thank you, not just to the members that have taken positions and carried out work over and above normal membership, but also to all the officers that have so ably supported members throughout the last year. I'm sure you won't find that political. So I think we have had excellent support from our officers, and our officers have worked exceedingly hard in very difficult circumstances, as have some members. So I'd like to record our thanks to all the officers, if I can, for the support that they've given the council over the last year. And that's a personal thank you from me. Thank you.
Yes, no, that's taken on board by everybody. I think we're all very grateful, and I hope you appreciate that I have done my utmost to keep this non-political. So if I do mention it once or twice, there's a reason for it, because that is parcel of the role. Thank you, members, and a
Thank
very
you.
good evening to you.